Okay, so again, you want to give that evidence or example. If you have a story from your own experience that supports your idea, it's an illustration of your idea, you want to give the experience. So again, transition words before your evidence. If it's a story from your, an example from your own life, you want to transition to that for the reader by using what's called a signal phrase, which could be, for example. I'm going to take this off. So it could be common signal phrases. Could be, I'm going to write that. Oh, my pen is not working. Okay, let's try this. Signal phrases. Could, like, for example. Specifically. For instance. There are many more. As an illustration, that sort of thing. So you're giving that signal phrase, that transition, before your example. So for your reader, what that says is example coming up, example coming up. It smoothly transitions them from your explanation into your example. They're very little words. They often get sometimes forgotten about, but we can't forget about them because they're very, very important. That they really help in clarifying your meaning, because they're transitioning you from this part where you're explaining it into this part where you are giving the example. When I was a student, I went through a phase where I decided not to do them anymore. I decided not to do transition words and signal words anymore. I was thinking I was like way too creative and sophisticated for such little formulaic words. I really did think that. I was a student at Solano College when I had this method that I decided to start employing. But I had a professor tell me, you should use transitions and signal phrases. So she said, like, you should put for example before your example. And I thought, oh, I have to put them back in. So, but I saw what she meant. I passed that on to you. Sometimes we just forget about them. So don't forget, though. They're very, very important for the reader. So I bring that up. All right. And again, transition words can include, we've got the, just put transition words could include, like first, second. You could do all numerical, like third. I like finally, like for your last point. You could also say like next, things like that, words like that. So they transition the reader into your next point. So they seem small, but they carry a big important meaning. All right, so and then after you I sort of release that piece of paper, but I'm just going to write this part again for the body paragraphs, since body paragraphs are very essential to essay writing, right? So again, you've got to have your topic sentence, right, in the body paragraphs. So we've got to have that topic sentence, and then we've got to have you've got to explain the topic sentence. Topic sentence is always one sentence, so let's put that there. The explanation is typically 2 to 3 sentences, and your example, typically 2 to 3 sentences, and then comes the analysis. There's that part, right? So then that is also typically 2 to 3 sentences. And if you're like, wait, analysis, what does she mean again? I can't remember. It's really just your focused thoughts on this issue, this reason. You get to share your thoughts, basically. It kind of is the glue that ties together your topic sentence, your example, everything kind of together. It just wraps it up, kind of, but your focused thoughts. So that is what I mean by English lasagna, because that is our body paragraph. First layer is typically the topic sentence. Second layer, typically the explanation. Third layer, typically example. Fourth layer, typically is the analysis. It could happen where your topic sentence is your second sentence, because maybe you need kind of a bridge from the last sentence to this one as far as explanation. That could absolutely be the case, but this is the norm. So if you have um, been someone, which is very common, that you've been struggling with topic sentences and essay structure, that's very common, so that's totally understandable. But you could use just kind of this review to help, like that you go, I've got to have my reason. What's my reason, right? So just, there you go. I have to explain my reason. Okay, fine, did that. I need my example. So what's my example? What's my little story that relates to this from my own life? Or what is a fact that I looked up? So examples could be, it needs to be some kind of evidence, right? So evidence can be fact. So you could just say there's a great quote from this article that you read that I sent out. Use it. That can be your example. It doesn't have to come from your own life, but it can. But you just need some specific evidence, and the evidence can be personal experience, but it can also be facts or statistics, or possibly a quote from somebody else's experience, from good academic college sources. I'll talk about that more in a minute, but that gives you that body paragraph structure. All right, so let's go back again to the prompt, and then it says, we talked about transition words. I've given some additional transition words examples in the prompt, so you can check that out. And then again, it says each paragraph has to have evidence, what I just said. You can check that out further, but it's what I just said. And then about the analysis, that you should have, at this level of writing for English 125, you should have some analysis in there. And that's how you can even look at it as like your philosophy, your philosophy about this issue, about that reason, right? So it's kind of the fun part, I think of it as. All right, so then it says sentence structure and grammar. You should have correct sentence structure and grammar. So take advantage of any and all programs on your computer program that are available. It's just to, often if it's set up that it will tell you if there's a grammar problem or a sentence structure problem, and or if you still have a handbook or a textbook from your previous class that has that in that, you can use that as a guide, but it should have correct sentence structure and grammar. Formatting is MLA, Modern Language Association, what most English classes uses. So it should be formatted MLA style. And what that typically means are a couple things. That it should be double spaced between lines. Your essay should be double spaced between lines, not between paragraphs. Normal spacing between paragraphs, double spaced between lines. So that is really important. It's very hard to kind of grade and put comments in when something is single spaced. So there is a reason for it, but it's also tradition. The tradition does come from a reason. So it needs to be double spaced between lines. So you can set up your program that way. All right. The other thing is that it needs to have that MLA spacing for your name and class information. I have a textbook that I used for the previous class, so I'm going to see if I can show that really quickly. I don't know how well I can show this, but I'm going to try to do that. So probably any textbook that you had from the previous class will give these examples. I'm using one called Steps to Writing Well that I use for previous classes. If you have specific questions on that, just ask, and I would ask me individually, and I'd be very happy to explain more specifically. But let me just see if I can find a paper example in here in the right chapter here, and show you what I mean about that heading. Not writing about literature. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so, and it needs to be, make sure that it's MLA style. APA is different, and some classes use that, criminal justice, psychology, nursing, but there are some things that are different, so you want to make sure it's MLA. All right, so for MLA, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to try to show that really quick. That's how your name and class information should look. I'll read over it. Your name goes in the left here. You know what I'll do? I'll try to do this. Let's do this easel thing here. I'll try to put it up here. It's really just having the correct MLA style for your paper. It really makes it look professional, and you want that professional touch, right? So you want to have in that left-hand corner, again, if you can see this, and I've just never done this before on this with this new digital world we're in, trying to show that to you. So you have this 1-inch margin this way and this way. So from the top, you got the 1-inch margin, and to the left. So there's that. And then what goes in on the top, I'm just going to write it here because it's easier to write it here. You put your name first and last. And then you put, you don't number it. I guess I won't number it. I was just trying to make a point. But then you put the professor's name, your name, the professor's name, the class name, you know, like English 125, and then the date. Typically it's the date it's due, I think, but if you put the date that, you know, say you turned it in a day earlier or something like that, that's fine. I mean, it's fine for me. Always ask, you know, your professor. But name, professor's name, class name, and date. So that's all in the left-hand corner. Again, you've got that 1-inch margin from the left, and you've got a 1-inch margin coming down this way. On the right side of the paper, I'm going to show you this. It goes on every single paper. I hope you guys can see this. Right there. Again, you've got the 1-inch coming down and over. That is then your last name and the page number. So then you have your last name and the page number. But you don't have to put page number. You don't put PG and then the number. That's more of an APA thing. So you just put, like, if it were me writing the paper, I would put Ryan and 2 or whatever the page number was, right? And you do that on every single page. This you don't do on every page. This you only do on the first page. The other one is on every page. Okay, so that's typically MLA style. If you do cite sources, meaning that you do use some quotes, some facts from, say, the articles I've sent out or something else that you looked up, then you are going to need a works cited, and it is called a works cited. So it will be a separate piece of paper. It's not really grouped together with the paper itself, with the writing itself. It needs to be a separate paper, and it will say works cited. That is what it's called. So it's not just called sources, that's APA. We want MLA, works cited. And then you list the sources that you used in the paper, and it's in alphabetical order. I will show you an example of that if I hope this works to show you on the camera, but I'll show you an example of a works cited. I really hope you could see that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's an example of a works cited. If you'll notice, it's in alphabetical order by last name of the writer that you're using, and etc. If you have specific questions for me on the works cited, I'd be glad to go over any of that more individually. All right. So MLA formatting, all right, source citations, again, we just started talking about that. I want to be clear, you don't have to use outside sources for this. You can do the paper with your own personal experience as evidence, that's fine. But I want to talk about, there's an extra credit option, so I want to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But it says, however, if you do consult or use sources or quotes, facts, or details from other sources, you'll need to correctly cite those sources, MLA style. And if you're taking on the extra credit challenge, there is an extra credit challenge about using sources. I'll talk about that in a minute. You would also need to cite them on your works cited. So the extra credit challenge is, so did I write that on here? Where is it? Here's the extra credit challenge. If you would like to, for extra credit, if you want to make this into a research paper, that you would make this into a research paper. You would lengthen the paper itself instead of the paper, and I guess I didn't put that on here. I don't seem to have that on there. The paper should be, let me back up a step. Instead of talking about the extra credit, I'll get to that. That's like something exciting news that's breaking soon. The paper itself should be 3 to 5 pages. I'll write that down here. So the paper should be pages 3 to 5. 3 to 5, again, double-spaced. 3 to 5 pages, double-spaced, okay? 12-point font, all right? So 12, okay, my writing skills are falling apart here. All right, so 12-point font, okay? So that is what is required. So you've got, it should be at least 5 paragraphs. So I'm going to put 5 plus paragraphs. Every essay that you ever write, ever, should be at least 5 paragraphs. If it's really not 5 paragraphs, it's really not an essay, seriously. So it has to be 5 paragraphs or more, because you need your intro, you need your conclusion, and you need to have the body paragraphs. I'm going to say a little bit more about the conclusion after I talk about this. So you have all of that as far as if you wanted, so yes, if you turned in anywhere from 3 to 5 pages and you gave your examples and they were from your own personal experience, totally fine, you did it. If you would like the extra credit challenge, then what you can do is you can make this into a research paper, and that would be, so it is making it from 5 to 7 pages. The 5 is kind of a crossover, right? So it's at least 5, but not more than 7. And then you would use at least, what did I say? Well, I'm going to make an executive decision now because I can't remember what I said earlier, I think, in the class. But I'm going to say 5 to 7 pages, and using 3 sources. So for that, 5 to 7 pages, making it into that, and using 3 additional sources. They can be, the sources could be from the articles I sent out. So there you go. They're from a variety of different viewpoints, so I tried to cover all that. But you can also use the databases that you learned about in English 120 to locate your own sources, as long as they are college academic sources. So databases you can't go wrong with from the library, but also any kind of a published news source that you can verify the information and is not being put out by a particular group, like a particular nonprofit that has an agenda. If that is going on, that's not going to work, really. It's not an unbiased source. So, and if you're, if you have a question on that, just ask me individually, because it's hard to kind of anticipate, every potential biased source in that regard. But some things that are also that you may run into when you're trying to look up information that are just not college academic sources could be things like, I've seen Study Help 123, Teen Inc. I've seen this, let's see, any of those, like, sort of Reddit, or like things like I've seen where, like, it's like a question and answer thing, and they give various, people have random opinions on, these various issues. No, that's not an article. Okay, that's not something you're going to use. You're going to go, no, that's not for me to use. So, but again, the databases, you're in good hands, and the articles I've sent out, they're on a variety of different viewpoints on the spectrum, and they're all from good news sources. The other thing about trying to figure out if your news source is one that would be good to use is that, can the facts be verified, and then in another source? I mean, so you could think of it that way, that sort of thing. You want to stay away from anything that's put out by a particular group, like, even if you love that group, that's totally fine, but they might be a nonprofit, or they might be it could be a religious group, could be something, right? But they have a particular point of view that they're trying to get across, and that's fine. We all have various views, but we need to be on the same page about sources, all right? So for this type of exercise, all right? And again, if you have questions on that, just ask. Okay, so there's that. Let me just talk about the conclusion really quick, as I have not done that as yet. So let's talk about the conclusion, and then we'll go over the articles. Okay, so your conclusion needs to do a couple of things. And it needs to, number one, touch back on the thesis. So you need to touch back on your thesis statement. What I mean by that is whatever you said in your thesis, you need to reinforce that. You don't want to say the same thing you said in your thesis. You don't want it to be like a rerun. You're like, wait, I read that somewhere. Where is that sentence? Oh, here it is right now. So you don't want to say the exact same thing again, but it's the same idea, and you're just saying it in a new way, maybe. But you do want to touch back on the thesis, re-emphasize it, that sort of thing. And then you want to wrap it up. Wrap it up. Give some closure. No cliffhangers. The reader should know exactly what your view is, all of that, right? You just want to offer some closure. Wrap it up. So touch back on the thesis and really wrap things up. One point that you could do is that you could, it's one option, it's not the only option, but you could sort of summarize your topic sentences. So that is optional, but you can summarize your topic sentences, meaning that you are just kind of going over your points again to reemphasize. And I'm going to put, again, this is optional. It's not the only way to do it, but it's one way that tends to be very effective. Another thing is you could offer a final thought, not a new thought that is a different direction than your thesis, but it's like a final thought that still kind of wraps it up. There's that idea. But so you need to give closure. You need to touch back on that thesis and just kind of wrap it up. All right. So it needs to be a full paragraph. Every paragraph really. For this purpose should be 4 to 5 sentences minimum. Well, 4 to 7. I'm going to say 4 to 7 sentences. Every paragraph in the paper should be about 4 to 7 sentences. So if you've only got 3 sentences, develop with a little bit more. What else can you say on it? Because that's a little too minimal, but it doesn't need to be, like 20 or something. In fact, if you have a paragraph that's a whole page, whoa, red flag, slow down, stop, look at it again. There's somewhere you got to break that paragraph up. Seriously, that's too long. But you're looking at maybe with double spacing, a quarter to a page, could even be half, usually a quarter. Is a good spacing guideline, something like that. All right, so we've gone over I didn't tell you how much about, okay, let me go into the extra credit. This is the fun part. So, again, if you want to use those sources and you want to go 5 to 7 pages instead of 3 to 5, and you want to use 3 to 5, not 3. You want to use 3 sources. You want to use 3 sources and make it into 3 to 5 pages and use a works cited. That's going to get you 7 points extra credit, up to 7. And that's why for full credit, you need to cite. Okay, let me write this down too for future reference, right? Okay, here's your conclusion info. Off that goes. Let's write down the extra credit. Okay, so extra credit. What do? You make this into 5 to 7 pages. Okay, you have 3 academic sources, and you cite those sources parenthetically and in a works cited. So 5 to 7 pages, 3 academic sources, and you cite them parenthetically, in parenthesis, in the body of your paper. So this is where we're going back everything you learned right in the research paper, and in your class for English 120, you still get to do. And we'll be doing a research paper at the end here. The last one is for sure a research paper. This is extra credit if you want to work out those skills now. So that's a plus in several ways. But you've got to hit all these marks for full credit. I do give partial credit on the extra credit. So if you use your 3 sources and it was 6 pages, but and you did some citing parenthetically, but it wasn't quite correct, and your works cited wasn't quite correct, you would get partial credit. I just have to evaluate it on how many of those you did. In order, you might get half or whatever. So you might get 3.5 points extra credit. It's all good. It can actually, depending on where you are, it can actually push you into another grade. It also builds your skills, gets you ready for the research paper at the end of the semester before we're there. All right. So the next thing I want to do is talk about the articles. So I sent out links to several articles, so I'll just tell you what those articles are, then I'll briefly go over them and tell you a little about them. I can't read them all to you here, although that'll be kind of fun, but very lengthy. So it might not be fun for you at all. That sounds super boring, actually, to just have me reading articles to you. So I'm going to give you an overview of each one. That way you can take a look at them, but you don't necessarily have to read every article in depth. I'm just putting them out to help you understand the issue better, help you to give you some perspectives on different sides of this issue, try to, as much as possible, give you the full spectrum, and then you decide what you think, and then these articles can be used for facts, for quotes, to support your idea and or to bounce off your idea. I just had a thought. Before I talk more about the articles, there is one other thing about this paper that's really important that I do want to talk about. And that is, I mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about it more. You need to talk about the opposition argument in your paper. So I talked about in the intro, it should be there where you're explaining both sides. Somewhere in the body of your paper, you must address the opposition. You must here are the 2 ways that, as I see it, that you could do. You could either seek to address their concerns, or number 2, show why your view is more compelling. Okay, so opposition. Somewhere in the body paragraph, as long as it supports that topic sentence of the body paragraph, you could have it in the body paragraph. Otherwise, you can give it a paragraph of its own, but it has to have a topic sentence. So you could end up with an extra body paragraph. That's fine. Or it just has to support your topic sentence. So what I mean by that is you're going to address one of their major concerns. So like you might say something like, while some say that, or some believe that, and then you're going to explain the view. Then you will seek to counter that. You will counter that argument. Again, you will not attack them. No name calling. No being sarcastic about their view. You will treat this as a legitimate point of view, a legitimate concern, not one that you share, but a legitimate concern. You will try to assess what the demographic is for that, meaning like maybe it's worried parents, teen or something like that. And you will try to address their concerns. So, for example, that's going back to the thesis I used as an example earlier, right? If you're breaking down like 13 to 14-year-olds online and you are arguing for a moderate supervision, then you might assess that an opposition argument would be concerned parents who don't want moderate supervision. They want a high level of supervision, right? And the reason they feel that way is they're worried. They're very concerned about safety. So, and they may not have grown up with the internet. So you have to keep their concerns in mind, even if you think, well, that's just silly, right? No, but you have to put yourself in their shoes. Once you can do that, then you can address their concerns. And one way to address their concerns might be something like, with some facts, right? With some facts about that the dangers that are out there are not actually that prevalent. Maybe you have some facts about that. Maybe you have some facts about um, I don't know. I'll give you one that I can think of that a student did for this paper. I think her setup of the children was like 9 to 12-year-olds, something like that, and she was advocating for a moderate amount of freedom online. And how she addressed the parents' concerns which was what she identified as her opposition, that wanted more of a high level of supervision, was saying that a lot of parents that didn't grow up with computers and the internet and all of that, that they might be very worried and concerned and fearful, really, and not knowing what's out there. And often the young folks are much more tech savvy, even at 12 years old, than the parents are. So she explained very detailed how to set up parental controls on the computer, because she said not everybody knows that, yet that can be a great tool. So doing that helps to address their concerns, takes it seriously, gives a solution while still supporting your view. You could also say, yes, that's a valid concern, but the loss to developing the students' online skills, that's too much of a risk in today's world. People need to be digitally savvy. Okay, so then that could be a way to address that as well.